Part 1. Invisible Among My Own. Growing up in a big, traditional family, you'd think there'd be warmth, support, and unity. But from as far back as I can remember, I knew I didn't belong. I was the black sheep, the one everyone forgot to greet, the one excluded from inside jokes, the one whose name was always pronounced with a slight hesitation, as if they weren't quite sure if I deserved to be there. Our family gatherings were frequent. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, Easter, and of course, the massive summer barbecues my Aunt Carla hosted at her 3-story mansion in the suburbs. I dreaded those events more than anything, not because I hated my family, but because I hated who I became around them. Small, silent, invisible. While my cousins shared stories of their promotions, their latest vacations to Bali or the Maldives, or their new relationships, I'd sit in the corner, nursing a drink, and pretending to scroll through something important on my phone. The truth was, I didn't have a glamorous job. I wasn't dating anyone. And the only recent trip I'd taken was to the grocery store to buy instant ramen, because my paycheck didn't stretch far enough for real meals. I was working part-time at a local electronics store, helping clueless customers figure out why their printers weren't connecting to Wi-Fi. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't prestigious, and in my family, anything less than outstanding was as good as failure. My mother always told me to be patient, to give them time. "They'll see your value one day, honey," she'd say, her voice soft with pity. I didn't want their validation. Or so I told myself. But deep down, I craved it. I wanted someone, anyone, to ask how I was doing and actually listen. But it never happened. At every gathering, I was the one they forgot in the family photos, the one asked to take the picture, not be in it. At dinner, they'd talk over me. Once, I tried to join a conversation about crypto. My cousin Jason, a finance bro with slick-back hair and a watch more expensive than my rent, interrupted me mid-sentence with a joke. Everyone laughed. I didn't finish my thought. I didn't even remember what it was. So, I stopped trying. I became the quiet one, the helper, the one who offered to wash dishes just to avoid the humiliation of sitting in the living room pretending to be part of something I wasn't. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't just wasting my time between jobs. I had been building something of my own. While my cousins interned at law firms and hedge funds their parents arranged for them, I was learning, quietly, obsessively, in the early hours of the morning, long after my shift at the electronics store ended. I taught myself how to code. I learned graphic design. I watched thousands of hours of YouTube tutorials about marketing, user engagement, psychology behind UI/UX design. I failed many times. I built 3 different apps that went nowhere. One of them got 5 downloads, and 3 of those were from my own devices. But I didn't stop. I believed, even when no one else did, that if I just kept going, something would click. And eventually, it did. It started small. A random post on Reddit about one of my side projects, a budgeting app tailored for freelancers. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Someone noticed. Then a YouTuber featured it in a top 5 free tools you didn't know you needed. My downloads spiked overnight. I stayed up for 36 hours straight, fixing bugs, responding to emails, and watching real-time analytics explode in a way that I'd only dreamed about. 3 weeks later, I got an email from a startup incubator in San Francisco. They were impressed. They wanted to talk. Fast forward 2 months, and I'd secured a $90,000 angel investment. I quit my job. I moved into a tiny studio apartment, away from home, and for the first time in my life, I felt in control. I was no longer the loser at family parties. I was building something real. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Because part of me was scared that it wouldn't last, that it would all fall apart, that I'd go back to being the guy they pitied. But also, part of me wanted to wait. to wait for the perfect moment. And that moment would come. Oh, would it come?
My Aunt Carla's 65th birthday was going to be the biggest family gathering in over a decade. Invitations had been sent out months in advance. My mother, of course, insisted I go. "She's your aunt," she said. "It would be rude not to show up. Besides, it's just one evening." One evening too many. I hadn't been to a family event in almost a year. I had avoided them under the excuse of being too busy with work, which wasn't entirely false. The startup I was now part of had gained traction, and our user base was steadily growing. I had hired a small team and moved out of the cramped studio into a loft apartment. My bank account looked healthier than it ever had, and for the first time, I wasn't worrying about whether I could afford rent and food in the same month. But when the invite came, something inside me stirred. Not guilt, not even obligation. It was curiosity. A quiet voice whispering, "Let them see who you are now." So I went. I didn't wear anything fancy, just a clean black blazer, dark jeans, and my usual sneakers. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to exist, finally, as myself. The moment I stepped into Aunt Carla's house, it all came flooding back. The laughter that wasn't meant for me, the polished kitchen where I'd usually hide, the subtle nods that barely passed as greetings. No one really noticed I had arrived. Even my mom was too busy chatting with Aunt Carla's church friends to say much more than, "You made it, sweetie." I hovered near the edge of the hallway, clutching a glass of lemonade and watching the interactions unfold like a movie I'd already seen too many times. My cousin Jessica was showing off her new engagement ring. Brandon, the finance guy, bragged about landing a new position at some investment firm. He kept saying 6 figures like it was a punctuation mark. When I finally approached the main living room, someone bumped into me. It was Brandon. "Oh, hey," he trailed off, squinting at me. "David? Denny?" "Daniel," I replied. Right, Daniel. Long time. What are you doing these days? Still working retail or something?" There it was, that old familiar jab, masked as casual conversation. I smiled politely. "I've been working on some projects, tech stuff." "Ah, I gotcha," he said, clearly disinterested. "My little brother's into that too. He's building an NFT trading site. Real cutting-edge stuff." I didn't bother explaining that NFTs were already tanking and that I had had 3 acquisition offers in the last month. It would have fallen on deaf ears. Dinner was served shortly after. I ended up at the kids' table. Yes, still. Apparently my spot hadn't changed since I was 15. The adult table was full, they said, but I watched them pull up an extra chair for Brandon's girlfriend when she arrived late. I laughed to myself. Some things never change. That was when the conversation turned to business. My ears perked up. Aunt Carla was telling the table about her attempt to launch an e-commerce store last year. It had failed miserably. "I spent thousands on a web developer. He ghosted me after the first month. Never trust freelancers." My cousin Jason jumped in. "I could have helped you if you'd asked, or better yet, Brandon knows some people." "I just wish someone in the family knew anything about websites. It would have saved me a lot of money." And that's when Brandon chuckled and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Yeah, maybe Daniel. Isn't he like into computers or something?" Laughter. A few polite chuckles from the adults. One cousin made a joke about me fixing printers. I didn't react, but inside something shifted. That was my breaking point. I stood up, calmly, quietly. The room didn't go silent at first. Why would it? No one expected me to speak. But I did. "Actually, I've been working on a platform with over 250,000 users. We just finished our second funding round." Silence. I continued, voice steady, but firm. "I left retail over a year ago, sold my first app for 6 figures, and I just bought a loft downtown." Now the room was really quiet. Even my mom turned to look at me, her mouth slightly open. Aunt Carla blinked like someone had thrown cold water on her. Brandon's smirk vanished. I don't usually bring it up because no one's really ever asked. It wasn't anger in my tone. It wasn't bitterness. Just truth. And it landed like thunder in a summer sky. I sat back down. Didn't smile. Didn't puff my chest. Just resumed eating as if I hadn't just flipped the entire family dynamic on its head. It was the first time I ever saw them speechless.
Part 3. They finally saw me. The room had gone silent after I spoke, like someone had pressed mute on an entire dinner party. For a few seconds, the only sound was the quiet clink of my fork against the plate. I wasn't dramatic about it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't shout, didn't gloat. I just said the truth. And apparently, the truth was the loudest thing I'd ever said. I could feel their eyes on me, some confused, some skeptical, others stunned. Brandon looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. My Aunt Carla, queen of the room, blinked like her brain was still buffering the update. And my mom, well, her expression was the hardest to read. Somewhere between shock and pride, but with a hint of something else. Guilt, maybe? I didn't expect applause, but what I got next was even weirder. People started changing. At first, it was subtle. My cousin Jason leaned toward me a bit at the table. So, what kind of platform did you say? Like social media or... I looked up from my plate and calmly replied, freelance budgeting for digital creatives. It integrates with accounting tools. We're building a marketplace around it. He nodded, clearly not understanding a word. Cool, that's, dope, man. Dope? Jason had never once said a word to me at a family event that wasn't sarcastic or dismissive. Then came Jessica. She moved over from the other end of the table and actually sat next to me. She asked if I was hiring, said her boyfriend had experience in marketing. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was interested, like I'd become someone valuable overnight. I didn't know whether to laugh or be insulted. By the time dessert came around, I was no longer the invisible one. I was suddenly the center of attention. Aunt Carla was asking if I could help her salvage her website idea. Brandon didn't say much, but I caught him glaring at me more than once. The golden boy didn't like losing his shine. But perhaps the strangest moment came when the younger cousins started approaching me, ones who had never even said hello before. Hey dude, can I DM you on Instagram? I've got this idea for an app too. Maybe you could check it out? I told him he could email me. I didn't want to sound arrogant, but I wasn't running free tech support just because I'd finally made it onto their radar. As the night went on, I began to realize something. I had waited so long for their respect, for this validation, and now that I had it, it felt hollow. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because it wasn't real. It wasn't built on knowing me. It was built on numbers, dollar signs, user counts, vague ideas of success. They didn't see me. They saw what I could do for them. Later that evening, I stepped outside to the patio to get some air. The house buzzed behind me, laughter, music, the clinking of glasses, but out here it was quiet, peaceful. I leaned on the railing, watching the lights shimmer over the backyard pool. That's when my mom came out. She stood next to me for a few seconds before speaking. She said, "You didn't tell me about all of this." I kept my eyes on the water. Didn't think anyone would care. She exhaled, long and slow. That's not fair. Isn't it? I turned to look at her. You've seen how they treat me, how you treat me. I was just the extra chair at every dinner. Her eyes glistened. I didn't mean to. I know, and maybe that's the worst part. No one meant anything. They just didn't see me, and now that I'm somebody, suddenly everyone does? She looked away ashamed. I'm proud of you. I should have said that more. I should have paid more attention. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I nodded. Thanks. I guess I just wanted one person to say that without needing a pitch deck first. She laughed softly and wiped her eyes. You always were different. Yeah, and for the longest time, I thought that was a bad thing. We stood there a while longer, saying nothing, just breathing. Inside, the party continued, but I didn't feel the urge to go back in.
For once, I didn't need them to validate me. I had built something with my own 2 hands through sleepless nights and constant failure. I had found purpose outside their gaze, and now that they were finally looking, I wasn't sure I cared anymore.
Part 4. The Last Family Gathering. The weeks after Aunt Carla's birthday were strange. My inbox started to fill up. Not from investors or users, I was used to those, but from family members. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out. Jessica emailed me a resume, Jason invited me for drinks, even Aunt Carla texted me, asking if I could pop by to look at her new Shopify account. For years, I had been invisible. Now I was in demand. But it didn't feel like a victory. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, reviewing my schedule, and realizing just how surreal my life had become. In the span of 12 months, I had gone from fixing broken routers to running a growing startup with 10 employees. I was being invited to speak at a small tech conference in Chicago. Venture capitalists were suddenly interested in a chat. But instead of feeling fulfilled, I felt conflicted. I thought success would fix everything, that once I made it, the pain of being ignored and dismissed would vanish, that my family would see me and it would all feel worth it. But here's what they don't tell you about finally being seen. It doesn't mean they understand you. It doesn't mean they respect who you were before the success. It just means you're useful now. About a month after the party, my mom called me. She sounded hesitant. "Sweetheart, we're having a small dinner next weekend. Family only. Everyone's hoping you'll come." I hesitated. Everything in me said don't. But something else, not guilt, not obligation, but something softer, said maybe I should. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll be there." This time, I arrived early. I wore a plain hoodie, jeans, nothing flashy. I didn't want attention, I just wanted to observe. The house was quieter than usual, just my immediate family and a few cousins. But the energy had shifted. People were trying harder, too hard, asking questions, offering me food, pulling me into conversations I normally wouldn't be included in. It felt fake, like they were still speaking to the idea of me, not the person I had always been. During dinner, Aunt Carla looked over at me. "Daniel, have you thought about buying a house yet? I know a great realtor." Jason chimed in. "You should talk to my buddy who runs a VC firm. He could help you scale." Jessica leaned over. "Hey, do you need a social media manager? I'm between jobs." It was endless. And then I finally asked something that had been brewing inside me for weeks. Would any of you have cared about what I was doing if I hadn't made money? The room froze. Aunt Carla fumbled with her fork. Jason shifted in his seat. No one answered. I was building this business for years, failing, trying, learning. Not one person in this room asked me how I was doing. Not once. And now suddenly I'm a point of interest? My mom looked down at her plate. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I'm not saying this to be cruel. I just want you to think about how many people in your lives are trying, struggling, working in silence, and you don't see them until they're useful." No one said a word, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that silence. I felt powerful. Not because I had money or followers, but because I had truth. That night was the last family gathering I went to. I still talked to my mom, visited her on Sundays, but I stopped trying to fit into a space that was never built for me. I started surrounding myself with people who saw me before the headlines, friends who supported my ideas when they were still messy sketches in a notebook, people who knew I was worth listening to long before I had something to show for it. And maybe that's the real lesson. It's easy to admire someone after they've succeeded. It's rare to stand by them when they're still unknown. If you're reading this and you feel like the black sheep, like you're not seen, not heard, not valued, please don't measure your worth through their eyes. Their silence doesn't define you. Their indifference doesn't cancel out your effort. And when your moment comes, and it will, you'll realize that you were never the black sheep. You were just a wolf in the wrong forest.